It's 6 o'clock. It is time to call the Sherwood City Council meeting to order. At this time, I would like to ask Robert Campbell to come forward. He's going to lead us in our prayer tonight.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your love and your mercy and your goodness to us, Lord. We ask now as we gather this night at the City Council to protect and keep each and every one here. We also ask that you touch our city leaders, give them wisdom, understanding. We ask above all that we give glory to your name. In your great name of Jesus we pray.
Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you call the roll, please? Brooks? Here. Harmon?
Here.
Lilly?
Here.
McMahon? Aye. Keplinger?
Here.
Sanders?
Here.
Williams? Here. Approval of minutes of the regular meeting on November 27th, 2017 is transcribed. Move the adoption. Second. McMahon?
Aye.
Harmon?
Aye.
Williams? Aye. Lilly?
Aye.
Sanders?
Aye.
Keplinger?
Aye.
Brooks? Aye. You have copies of November 2017 financials. Are there any questions or discussions? Hearing none. Before we move along in our agenda, I would like to take the opportunity to introduce our new economic developer, Colleen Carr. You want to just stand up and give them away? She hasn't officially started yet, but she has given her intent to come and notice to where she's at. So she'll be a great addition to our city, and we look forward to what she's going to bring in the new coming year. So welcome to Sherwood. Thank you.
Is there a motion to waive the reading requirement? So moved. Second.
McMahon?
Aye.
Harmon?
Aye.
Williams? Aye. Lilly?
Aye.
Sanders?
Aye.
Keplinger?
Aye.
Brooks? Aye. 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 Committees and or commissions. Advertising and Promotion Commission.
We did not meet this past month. I do want to report on the Trail of Lights that to date we have had over 11,000 cars, which is way up from last year. We've collected over $33,000 worth of money, which is way up from last year, and collected a lot of food. We don't have an official total on that, but I appreciate everybody that's come out to support it. We will be open until December 30th, and we're open from 6 to 9:30 every evening. There have been some traffic issues, but please, guys, just be patient. It only happens once a year, and come early, and then you don't have to worry about it. Come during the week, you don't have to worry about it. I think the Parks and Rec's done a marvelous job, and our police department's done a marvelous job in making sure that the traffic tries to run as smoothly as possibly can. So I just appreciate all the work that's been done by everybody, including the city clerk's office and people up back there, Paul Brown. So thank you, everybody, for all the hard work. It takes a village, as they say. So thank you. Oh, and yes. And we did not meet in December, but we do resume our regular meeting in January.
Very good. Thank you. Civil Service Commission. Parks and Recreation Committee.
The minutes of our December 4th meeting are in your packet if anybody has any questions. There will not be another meeting in December. And then I don't know if we'll meet in January. If we have business, we'll meet in January. Otherwise, questions?
Very good. Thank you. Personnel Committee.
We did not meet, and I'm not sure that we'll have anything on the agenda for January. But if we do, we'll be January the 4th at 5:30.
Thank you. Planning Commission.
An ordinance amending Ordinance 729 and all subsequent amendments regarding notice requirements of existing zoning regulations in the city of Sherwood, Arkansas, and for other purposes.
This was tabled at the November meeting. Do you need?
In your packet, there should be a copy of a letter from the planning commission, there was an error in the minutes that were in last month's meeting. This actually did pass and was to come to city council for consideration. So we just put it back on after we discovered our error.
And this, I had made a recommendation after last council, and then we figured out we were going to take it off the agenda, but I'd like to go back and make that recommendation again. Oftentimes, people don't open certified letters. And so I'd like to propose an amendment to this, and the body of section 1 and section 2, just before where it says certified letter, I'd like to propose it say by both U.S. mail first class and certified letter, so that the notice is sent both first class mail and certified letter.
I'll second that amendment because I know that that's a great idea. That's a good idea.
We have a member of our planning commission. Is there anything that you was wanting to say? If there's any questions you are.
I was just going to stand up here and see if they needed that.
We're going to need you in a minute.
For sure. Our discussion.
Okay, you got a motion and a second on the amendment.
McMahon,
Aye.
Harmon.
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Lilly,
Aye.
Sanders,
Aye.
Keplinger,
Aye.
Brooks,
Aye.
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 And ordinance amending ordinance 729 and all subsequent amendments regarding notice requirements of existing ordinance regulations in the city of Sherwood, Arkansas, and for other purposes as amended.
Move for the adoption as amended.
Second.
McMahon,
Aye.
Harmon,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Lilly,
Aye.
Sanders,
Aye.
Keplinger,
Aye.
Brooks,
Aye.
Aye.
And ordinance rezoning property located at 2120 East Keel Avenue from R1 to O1, amending the zoning map and for other purposes.
Move for the adoption of the ordinance.
Second that motion.
Wait. You want to do emergency clause?
Well, there had been a request to add an emergency clause to that. I didn't know if the council wanted to entertain that before we vote or not.
Oh, well, I'll move to, we put an emergency clause on it because he needs to.
Okay, so that'll be an amendment, so we'll need a vote on the amendment.
We have to have a second.
I'll second that amendment.
McMahon,
Aye.
Harmon,
Aye.
Williams,
The amendment is just for the emergency clause, correct?
Yes.
Aye.
Lilly,
Aye.
Sanders,
Aye.
Keplinger,
Aye.
Brooks,
Aye.
Aye.
An ordinance for zoning property located at 2120 East Keel Avenue from R1 to O1, amending the zoning map and for other purposes. That is the reading as amended.
Move for the adoption
Well,
of the ordinance.
before we do that, Dr. Fender is in the audience and he wants to explain about his emergency clause.
I've been told, hello, I've been told Municipal League has cautioned y'all about doing emergency clauses and has kind of told y'all not to do it. But the reason I'm asking for the waiver on this is the building has been sold basically for 3 months. And we're just simply waiting on the rezoning. I have an attorney who wants to have his office in that building and he can't move forward with his loan from the bank until he gets O1 zoning on the property. So the only thing it will do if I don't get this, it will just keep it from being, was it 30 days or 60 days before we can do this? So I would appreciate your support for this. And that's why there's a pending deal on this. There was no opposition from any of the neighbors. Didn't get one call.
Good
So
job.
everything that was supposed to have been done was done on this. So
What's the pleasure of the council?
Move for the adoption or
Office.
Office.
Very light. About as
Yeah.
light as
Second.
perfect. I didn't hear. who
Quiet
made the
office.
motion.
Ken.
Ken moved for the adoption of the ordinance and
Mike Sanders.
Second.
McMahon,
Aye.
Harmon,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Lilly,
Aye.
Sanders,
Aye.
Keplinger,
Aye.
Brooks,
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
and the emergency clause, please.
McMahon,
Aye.
Harmon,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Lilly,
Aye.
Sanders,
Aye.
Keplinger,
Aye.
Brooks,
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Steve, just because it's rezoned now, means you still have to come back to Sherwood.
I said a while ago, I've only been back one time since I went off the council in 2012. And when I came back for the planning commission meeting last Tuesday night, it felt pretty strange sitting out there. I felt like I should have been sitting up here. So, thank you very much for this. I appreciate it. Y'all have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And ordinance amending ordinance number 729 and later amendments regulating accessory building, repealing conflicting ordinances, and for other purposes.
I do have a question about this one. Can we ask the question now?
I do too.
Here's your man.
Hello. Quick question on this. In reading, in scanning the minutes I got from your meeting this last week, the only opposition that this was about was regarding the height. And that's, went from the 14 feet to the 17 feet. There was no height at all originally.
There has been a height in the past. It's been 10-foot sidewall.
Uh-huh.
The discussion about height was a maximum height overall, meaning like a ridge height
Right.
of into tall,
Not door frame height.
not sidewall height as in the past.
Okay.
But there was lengthy discussion that occurred at the planning commission. Ultimately decided not to go that route of putting a maximum height in there for a couple of reasons.
This proposal does have a maximum height in there.
It has a maximum sidewall height, not a maximum height at the ridge at the very highest point.
So the apex can be more than 17 feet. Okay, all right.
17-foot sidewall height only applies to a half-acre lot or greater.
Right, I know, but it has to be smaller than that if it's less than half acre, as I read it. Now, I mean, my interpretation of this from having heard dialogue in the community is that we years ago wanted to do a restriction on RVs being parked in front yards and things like that. And some of the reasons that persons would need something that would be 14 feet or higher would be to put those RVs in their backyards or someplace like that, correct?
So that's why we left the 17-foot on the half-acre lots and greater, because those are going to be the lots that are big enough to build a building to put an RV.
Okay.
When we're seeing lots of variances for that, so we're trying to get away from having to do variances.
Okay.
Now,
And these are not, I'm going to try to say this the proper way. These are non-residential second structures in the backyard, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So we're not building mother-in-law quarters in the backyard on this lot. Thank you.
We have some that are mother-in-law's quarters
Yeah.
because we have some garages that have mother-in-law quarters over them that have been treated as accessory structures in some parts of the city. But that my problem with it when I was doing the math on it is there's no mathematical relation to the half acre and the above half acre. For instance, when I go from 850 square feet to a calculation for 1 acre, I get a 2,178 square foot building. I don't get a 1,600 or anywhere close to 1,600 square foot maximum building. And when I go to larger lots, for instance, I live in the middle of Sherwood on Club Road, and I've got 4 acres. I got a house and a yard and an acre, and then I've got 3 acres in back, which is just big enough for 3 horses at most. And this calculation puts an 8,700 plus square foot accessory buildings, allows me to build 8,700 square foot in accessory buildings on my property. And the largest house in my neighborhood is 5,500 square feet. So you're talking about 3,200 square feet in excess of the largest house in our area in accessory buildings.
You're on 1.1, Charlie.
I'm on 4 acres.
Pardon me?
She's asking you
Four.
which section are you
You're
referring to?
talking
Yeah,
about that part about the
I'm talking about
5%.
10.1.2 is
That's
the
thank you.
section
That's-
I'm reading, and I'm
thank
doing the calculations at 43,560 square foot an acre, and then 5% from there.
Right.
And I'm just trying to figure and you're the math teacher. I'm trying
know,
to figure a
that's what I'm
mathematical relation between the 850 and then the 5% of 43,560, and I'm not getting the mathematical relation. Am I making sense that there's not a mathematical relation in those steps?
There's not. Most of the newer subdivisions, Miller's Crossing and all those that are coming now are 30-acre lots. We put a number to that one. That way you could have it. But to help avoid a variance for anybody that has a large lot, we should find a percentage. We had several divisions in previous drafts of it. It was 5 or 6 divisions. It was going to be very cumbersome to Paul and Andy during submission for a building permit time. So we made this divide line of less than a half acre. That would be most of your newly platted subdivisions, greater than a half acre for anybody that had a larger lot.
Yeah, And I mean, you're talking to somebody who grew up on the quintessential large lot in
Yes, sir.
Sherwood, 14 acres in the middle of the city. But you know, we had a barn with seven horse stalls, two haylofts, and a tack room, and it was maybe 2,100 square foot. That barn was. It didn't take that that much square footage, and then we had a shop in addition to that. But I'm wondering if we need to
Well,
look at this and look at being
A
a cap
maximum
or somewhere on
cap?
this, an upper end cap or something. Because I mean, once we adopt this, the cat's out of the bag. And I mean, I can't think of what I want to build that's 8,700 square feet behind my house, but maybe I can think of something.
Yes, but do you want that next door to you to look at?
I want to
It's
hear
more
your
to the
reasoning.
question.
But in your case, yours is probably far extreme of big.
Yeah.
Typically, most of the folks that are coming to them, and we've had two in the last 3 or 4 months come for variances due to square foot size. Most of those lots are an acre to an acre and a half. So if you do the math on that, an acre is
2,100
about
square foot.
2,100 square feet. With 2,100 square feet, 30 by 40, that's what these people are coming to ask for.
Do we not have, I'm
Or
sorry.
something basically like.
But there still are, I mean, my own old home was on an acre and a half. Next door was 2 acres. And those were new construction. And I would have been horrified had my neighbors put up a great big metal, 2,000 plus square foot thing for me to look at. I mean, that's the only thing that I'm,
But there's covenances in your,
no. And neighborhood covenances, because that came up during the building process, and attorneys looked at it, and neighborhood covenances don't really hold up in court.
Well, they're hard to enforce.
You have to show that you are totally. I mean, it's got to be extreme to where you are devaluating the entire neighborhood. So a lot of these neighborhoods think they've got these strict covenances, but when they go to court, they don't hold up.
I like the idea of fixing the ordinance rather than doing I think the first draft we got a few months ago was just doing a waiver, allowing waivers to be presented. And I like the idea of
I do
fixing
too.
the ordinance rather than that. I just think we need to look at either possibly trying to get a mathematical relation between the half acre and then going up from there, and then also looking at, I'd like to see an upper end cap to say that there can't be more than any single accessory building of more than a X number of square feet or something of that nature, and see what they think what that upper end cap would be. I mean, like I said, I mean, I don't know if we have many houses larger than 5,500 square feet in Sherwood.
Huge numbers.
So
There are a couple.
Oh, yeah, there are.
but so I don't know. But and off the top of my head, I don't know what those numbers would be. But like I said, I just don't. I'm hesitant to open
If you did a
can of worms here.
if you did a correlation between, okay, you're looking at part A.
Right.
Hey, Blake.
And do we want accessory
hang on a
buildings
second.
larger than the home themselves?
No, it says you can't be.
I think we need to look at this more closely and tweak it and not pass it tonight.
I'm just gonna suggest that if y'all want to discuss the idea of having a cap on the larger lots, let's discuss it.
I do. I do too. Like the question I had for you was this though. You in part A of that, you've got a cap. You've got a cap of 850 square feet. All right. And I think what Councilman Harmon's asking is that when you go to more than an acre, which is twice a lot, at least twice a lot, then I mean you've allowed.
The 850 number is basically was keeping in line with that 25% rule that has been in there. Basically accessory structure couldn't be greater than 25% of the square foot of the roof of the house.
Okay.
Structure on that. That's where about that 850 number comes from, because that's
That's about 3,000. Okay.
2,600. I'm trying to do that.
Well,
800 would be 32, so
yeah, that's right. It's a little bit more than that.
a little bit more than that. So, and that's square footage under roof, not
Okay.
heated and cooled, okay? Porches and garage included. So that's where that 850 number came from, to put a number to it. But we tried to come up with some number to be a maximum as lot coverage, not to have to divide it to between a half and one and one and two and five and have 9 divisions to go through of going, okay, what's the lot coverage? This rule applies.
Mhm.
That way it's, we were trying to simplify it for building permit process purposes.
And there's no regulations on here. It can look like anything. This is just the square
No,
footage, right?
No, this is only part of the ordinance. These are only two
That's just-
pieces. These are the only sections.
No, but if you look throughout the whole thing, I don't see any part where it talks about,
Oh, that's another section of the ordinance.
Well, I know you guys are talking about, lots that are half acre or larger, but even in the, half acre and smaller, 850 square foot. A building that's 40 foot wide and 20 foot deep is only 800 square foot. That's pretty big.
That's true.
Stick out behind my house,
That's true, but don't lose sight of the fact that you still got to meet all the setbacks. Probably won't ever be able to build that.
Right.
To be 10 feet off your house, out of the easements in the rear, and 4 foot off the rear and the back, you probably won't be able to cover 850 square.
Good point. Good point.
In a platted, fairly new neighborhood.
That was the discussion we had when we adopted the original ordinance with
Right.
those square
So-
footages, that it had to meet the
That's not in there.
setbacks, which
But,
protected.
this is not impacting the setbacks at all. There might be the rare lot, odd-shaped lot in a newly platted subdivision that you might be able to build that, but your normal 75 by 135 or 70 by 130 rectangular lots that most of them are platted now, you won't ever be able to. You don't have the room.
Yeah, the only,
that's
Charlie, do you-
determining, we're not limiting the height, so we
You're
can.
limiting the height by the height of the sidewalk, not at the ridge of the roof.
the,
I understand that.
And so, and that whole discussion about the height was back to bill of assurance and neighborhood covenants, whatever term you want to use them. If you put a number to it, a hard number to it, and somebody comes in one of the fairly new neighborhoods and says, I want to build an accessory structure, and my height, your maximum height is 15 feet or whatever the discussion was. You come build a building in a new neighborhood and it says you got to have a minimum 7, 12 pitch, 8, 12 pitch, whatever the covenant says, or match the structure, match the architecture of the house. Just for mathematical purposes, make it equal. 20-foot wide building, 12 pitch, gains 10 feet. 10-foot sidewalks, 20 foot tall. So which one do you want to apply? The number that y'all put in there is a maximum height, so they break their bill of assurance and get sued by their neighbors for breaking that, or they're gonna have to follow the ordinance. So that's why we left the maximum height. That makes sense?
Mhm.
I like it.
Quick question from what you just said. So in reality, can the accessory building be taller than my home structure?
Be very difficult.
Okay, and I think that's the only purpose people have for the height is they don't want to see the auxiliary building as the first thing they see. They want to see the main building first.
But you limit that by, maximum height at the
Right.
side is 10 foot. So
Johnny, do you think a percentage is better than a
I like,
minimum height?
no, I've got no problem with the percentage use for things over, and I understood his reasoning for why
Right.
they went to
Yeah.
a percentage when they got over a half acre. I've got no problem with that. I think that we just need an upper end cap so that we don't have, because when we get out, there are some subdivisions, some future platted subdivisions and plans for some future subdivisions in,
Well, I was thinking Oakdale's what I was thinking.
in your ward and Mike's ward and Gravel Ridge area that are going to have 2, 3, 4, 5 acre lots, and they plan for them to have large lots, as big or bigger than the lot I live on. So, you're talking about 8,700, 10,000 square foot potential accessory buildings, the right to 10,000 square foot of accessory building. And I can't think of any reason that anybody needs 8,000 or 10,000 square footage of accessory building beyond there.
In their
Well,
backyard.
well,
Okay,
business.
so
If you
like
got-
barn, can we put a number to it then?
If you got acreage, if you
You
got
have a
the
barn.
acreage, and you got a barn, 8,000 square.
I grew up with it.
I did
grew
too,
up with
Charlie.
two of
A
them.
huge
I grew up with
barn.
two of them, a huge barn and a shop, and we didn't need that.
Think about, think about a 6,000 square foot home. You're thinking you need an 8,000 square foot barn. Nobody needs an 8,000 square.
I don't know. I like a lot of space. What?
I do
I want to
too.
hear what you got to say from the building department. You're trying to speak.
Or if you got,
I'm gonna just make a suggestion, based on, the real purpose of this is back in August, the planning commission, with some new members particularly, came to the realization, and there was some discussion about, we just are, very frequently passing variances for storage, accessory structures, and the conversation was, let's go to the city council and get a discussion together to see if we can come up with a better ordinance that would prevent us from getting so many variance requests. And I think what Alderman Harmon's saying is a good idea. Let's talk about a cap for a minute. Okay, what is realistic for a 2 or 3 acre lot? A guy typically, what we're getting a lot of requests for is like 40 by 50s, which is a 2,000 square foot building. And a guy might have an RV in addition to that. That, and that's realistic. So maybe what we ought to be doing is just adding a cap of somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 or 3,500 feet for any acre, and try that. And if we continue to have a lot of problems or a lot of requests, we can revisit it. But maybe that's a good place to go.
Well,
from here.
We'd rather see your stuff under the roof, stowed and stowed and put away than setting out all over your property.
Absolutely. But then would you like to propose that
I would-
amendment to
I
this
think
ordinance?
that's a friendly amendment.
I
I think
agree.
3,500 is a good number.
I will second
let's go
that amendment.
4,500.
No, that's too much.
I will second your 3,500 amendment.
Yeah.
Under section 10.1.2 with the max.
B, under B,
B, yes.
10.1.2,
So
10.1.2 B, subject to a 3,500.
Max.
So just make sure I understand. B would be for half acre and greater, 5% of lot coverage with a 3,500 square foot max.
Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
Why don't we just compromise and go 4,000?
No,
then?
it's too much.
Call for a
You have
vote on the amendment.
You have a motion and a second on the
Call for the
amendment.
vote. Men,
Aye.
Harmon.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Lilly.
Aye.
Sanders.
Aye.
Keplinger.
Did you say 35?
I like 4,000. Aye.
Brooks.
Aye.
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 Call for the vote for the ordinance, for the amended ordinance,
Second.
please.
You gotta read it.
I bet you could read it. You have to read it.
You want to read it, Bev? You want me
No,
to?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Go.
An ordinance amending ordinance 729 and later amendments regulating accessory buildings, repealing conflicting ordinances and for other purposes. This is the reading subject to the amendment.
Move for the adoption of the ordinance.
Second. You were the one that hurt.
McMahon.
Aye.
Harmon.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Lilly.
Aye.
Sanders.
Aye.
Keplinger.
Aye.
Brooks. Aye.
TO3
Aye.
committee.
Aye.
I understand that perhaps
Congratulations.
permits, they're waiting on this.
Thank
so
you, Blake.
That will be some good
Thanks for
news
your hard
the
work,
property
guys.
owner.
Thank you, Blake.
You guys don't have
Appreciate both you guys' input.
Now, Andy, thank you.
Get rid of it.
Senior Citizen Committee,
You don't even have that square foot.
Sewer Committee, Street Committee.
Street committee did meet. I'm surprised you've got minutes in your packet, but you do. We had a good long meeting last Thursday.
Really?
Anyone have any questions or thoughts?
I think some of that will come up at sales tax
I
discussion,
think you're
correct?
probably right, Mayor.
All righty.
An ordinance establishing business license provisions for medical marijuana businesses operating in the city of Sherwood, Arkansas, declaring an emergency and for other purposes. That's the third reading of that ordinance.
Move for the adoption.
Second. McMahon.
Aye.
Harmon.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Lilly.
Aye.
Sanders.
Aye.
Keplinger.
Aye.
Brooks.
Aye.
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 There is an emergency clause.
McMahon.
Why is there an emergency clause?
When we
May I
wrote
ask?
this, we were trying to be proactive and get out front because we had been contacted by some prospective businesses, and I'm not taking a side on that either way. but we felt like it was important to get this in front of the council as soon as possible. However, I think it was, if I can remember 2 months back, it was kind of the thinking at the time that maybe this was something that we ought to let simmer a little bit and go from month to month. And perhaps the emergency is not an emergency now, but in the original document, it does appear.
I don't have any problem with emergency clause.
I don't think the state.
I just wanted to know, because I know it's still probably gonna be June or so before it gets where it can
Like
be
the
done. Is
state's-
that correct?
It's taking some time on that.
Yeah, that's true. They're just now getting to it. We were trying to get in front of it.
Okay.
So the emergency clause is not really needed.
So there is an emergency clause in the document, so you need to vote on it. You can vote no.
Sure. Let's vote on
Okay, so call the roll.
McMahon,
please.
No.
Harmon.
No.
Williams,
No.
Lilly,
No.
Sanders,
No.
Keplinger,
No.
Brooks. No. Aye.
No.
An ordinance authorizing the sale and consumption of alcoholic beverages on premises consumption pursuant to Arkansas Code 39203 as amended within the city of Sherwood, Arkansas, and for other purposes.
Move for adoption.
Thank you, voters.
Aye.
Harmon,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Lilly,
Aye.
Sanders,
Aye.
Keplinger,
Aye.
Brooks.
Aye.
Aye.
A resolution reappointing council members and citizens to various boards, committees, and commissions.
Move for the adoption.
Second.
McMahon,
Aye.
Harmon,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Lilly,
Aye.
Sanders,
Aye.
Keplinger,
Aye.
Brooks.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Council members, item 11 on the agenda is the resolution that is a reimbursement resolution that is contemplated in tandem with calling for a sales tax election and the consideration of one or both proposed taxes. During street committee, it became apparent, I believe, that while we do need this resolution in place as we move forward, we don't need it in place yet. And it needs to come back on the January agenda. So I would ask if there's agreement as to that, a motion to push this to the January agenda.
So moved.
Second.
McMahon,
Aye.
Harmon,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Lilly,
Aye.
Sanders,
Aye.
Keplinger,
Aye.
Brooks.
Aye.
Aye.
Mayor, that is the agenda.
Under old business, sales tax discussion.
Okay. So I believe in each of your council package, there are some ordinances that were drafted for the purposes of discussion. At our last street committee meeting, I think we've provided the information to fill in the blanks and actually get this in front of this body at the January meeting for a vote to not pass the ordinance, but approve the language and send this to the Department of Finance and Administration for their approval. They have to approve it first before we can approve it, and then actually make a ballot of it. So,
Kevin, I think I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think the timetable was if the council's comfortable with format, if Mr. Spivey in his meetings with the engineers and with Brian, that we could then go ahead and send these before the January meeting to DF&A, and if we get their approval, then they could be in front of the council for consideration at the January meeting. No, it should have to be passed, but at least that's my understanding of what we came away with at that meeting. And if I'm mistaken, I apologize.
well, and Steve, we had a lot of discussion around that, and I think, what my brain recalls is that we didn't want to send something to DFA, put their stamp on it, and then it comes back here and we have to reword it or change it or what have you. So, I think we were wanting, not an official, council, hey, this is what we're going to do, but just a verbal vote that supports the language that was there before we sent it off to DF&A. So, you and I've got a little bit of a difference there, and I don't know that it matters one way or the other, with the exception of if we send it to Department of Finance and Administration, they approve the language, and then this body, changes it, then it has to go back, for their approval again.
And I'm sure that's not unusual, though. Do you agree?
I wouldn't know one way or the other.
I mean,
whether that's
for legal
unusual or
documents,
not.
go back and forth.
Mr. City Attorney.
No, they send them back.
That's what I'm thinking.
No, that can happen. But Leanne, help me out here. Weren't we talking?
Okay. Okay, so what if DFNA comes back with an edit? Then we still have to vote again.
We'll fix it.
Okay.
But
okay. Correct. Okay.
Right. What I was going to ask for, whatever point we get to, was a consensus among the council that they're happy with the language. It wouldn't be necessarily a vote per se. It would just be permission to send it to DFNA.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So, with that, we've got there's three different ordinances in your packet. They're labeled ordinance 1, 2, and 3. Mr. Spivey was very upfront in saying that that's not how the ordinances would be numbered. That's just for draft purposes. The first ordinance number 1 is for the quarter-cent sales and use tax. That would be the ordinance that approves the quarter-cent. I'll tell you that this at our last council meeting morphed from a operations and maintenance budget for the street fund into a general fund view. So, the street committee really doesn't have any roots in this ordinance or this quarter-cent sales tax any longer. So, if we wanted to continue forward with that, certainly understand the city has needs, but that wouldn't be sponsored by the street committee at this point. That would go elsewhere, I suppose.
But this ordinance in front of us, Mr. Lilly, actually is supporting the street and drainage.
Ordinance number 2.
Number one does.
Number 2 is the
Number 1 is definitely says it's for the drainage and city streets.
Number 2 says general fund.
So you've got there was a couple of different things, and this came up in street committee meeting. Number 1, the first ordinance or ordinance number 1 is the ordinance to levy the tax, the quarter-cent sales tax. Ordinance number 2. Listed as number 2 is the ordinance calling for the special election.
Correct.
Okay. One of the options that was presented to the street committee was that this quarter-cent sales tax could be used as an insurance or a secondary coverage to repay bonds if it were needed. The street committee decided that was not something that we really wanted to pursue. We did ask Ms. Leanne to look at and see if we had to have this as a secondary coverage to get the amount of money that we needed, on bonds, and we do not. So the first section of that would read, it reads, sales and use tax within the city of Sherwood, Arkansas to secure the repayment of bonds issued to finance and refinance extensions, betterments, and improvements to the city's street and drainage system. That section would be struck from the ordinance. It would just be to provide support for the city's general fund and prescribing other matters pertaining thereto.
Kevin, and I was only able to be there for part of that discussion part. But one of the things that I took away, though, from that, the part that I was able to participate in, listen to, was that the importance of that money being able to be used for one-time capital improvements versus ongoing raises, salaries, and those type of things in the general budget because it's only for a set period of time?
So, good question. Good question. The $0.25 sales tax that was proposed by the street committee was to support the operations and maintenance street fund and was not to be presented to the citizens as a tax that would go away. I mean, it would have been a permanent tax, and it was remained as such when we discussed it at the last council meeting. So so that there is no sunset, and I'm using the word sunset. That's not the proper term when you're securing bonds with a tax. Okay. Because the tax would cease to be collected once the bonds were satisfied. So in a sunset is a whole different thing. So the quarter of a cent, if we were to leave the language in there, really, then the money has to be, let's see, money would have to be secured to repay the bond. And I believe on a monthly basis before that dollar off the $0.25 could be used for anything else. But in this case, that money is not needed to secure the bonds that we want for the street improvements, etc. So,
well, Leanne, do you mind if you could tell us briefly about the market effect of the underlying quarter and what the thinking was about on that?
Not to confuse matters, but I'm going to pass this around. This is just a that laugh. Whoever had that?
Me.
Okay, so what we did after the meeting Thursday evening, we went back, got with our desk. You're not going to be issuing these bonds for probably another year. Who knows what the interest rate's going to be? So we took current market 100 basis points plus 1%. If we go out 20 years, the annual debt service would be about $2.7 million. So you'd have a stated maturity of 2038, but all of that 0.75% tax would go to pay those bonds off. So the projected payoff would be 2031. Okay, so that's what the first green section shows you. Based on, I used 2016 calendar tax collections, had a decrease in tax collection. Today, that year-to-date number is a lot bigger. You've had a lot of growth this year, a lot of great growth. But if I use 2016, that $2,769,000 in annual debt service, basically for every dollar you would owe, you have $1.29 in revenue. So your coverage is 1.29. Okay, using 2016 numbers. You could, and some cities do this, they say, well, the bondholder's trying to decide between buying Sherwood's bond that has $1.29 coverage and a Benton bond that has $1.60 coverage. Which one are they going to buy? And they're going to look at everything, right? The diversity of the economics in Sherwood, which may be changing with your new, growing with your new director. And other factors, population, things of that nature. You can pledge that second tax so that the bondholder suddenly goes from $1.29 coverage to $1.72. But one of the great concerns expressed at the street committee was, well, we want to make sure that $0.25 tax goes to the general fund because the general fund needs it. Well, if you know you've got $1.29 coverage without the second tax, your tax would have to decrease over 20% in order to hit that second tax. So, we wouldn't expect that. We would not expect that to happen. So it's just additional security for the bonds. We can do this either way you want. It really is. If you're not comfortable pledging that second tax, you don't have to do it. We can structure it. What we may do is when we get to that point, we look at the market, we meet with the rating agencies.
they'd like to see it greater than 129 coverage, which they'll never tell you that up front, of course. We might go out 25 years instead of 20, because it really doesn't matter, because 100% of that 3/4 cent tax is going to go to pay off those bonds. So there's different structuring techniques you can use.
Does it change the amount that we get overall?
No, it does not.
Okay.
What could change the amount you get overall is rate movement.
So in that meeting, you talked about, so it could potentially shorten the amount of time, therefore freeing up, I think it's a 2020, or not 2020, but 2025 or something, so that we'd be able to do more sooner. And that we are a growing community in terms of, like, instead of it being over a longer term, the bonds would pay off sooner.
They would pay off sooner if your tax grows. The 2031 estimated payoff date is 0 growth. So you know, with some of your businesses, you're putting in that number.
One of the other things that we did talk about at the street committee meeting was that, by securing, bonds with a secondary tax, the 1/4% that we're talking here, we don't really know whether that buys us a better interest rate or not, and we wouldn't know until that time came. So, there's nothing out there, and don't let me put words in your mouth, but it says if you're secured, to this amount, you get a better percentage rate, or you get this percentage rate versus that percentage rate. I mean, that's just not available. And at this point, if the people were to vote and support the 3/4 cent bond tax that we're asking for, again, there's more than enough tax there to support paying these off in a time frame that doesn't kick these requirements so far down the road that we're having our kids and grandkids pay for it. I mean, so they can be the bonds can be issued, be used, and paid for in a timely fashion without adding the additional 1/4% to secure the bonds.
Can I clarify something? Within the 3 ordinances, if these are discrete ordinances, okay? My question is, sometimes I'm hearing back and forth about the 2, Ordinance 1 and Ordinance 2 with regard to the permanent tax versus the insurance for the city. Let's just say that all 3 of these went forward. Are we talking about a 1.25% tax? Are we talking about that these 2, this is the insurance on the other one? That's the part that's unclear to me, and I need some explanation about.
So I think I can help you with that.
Good.
So I didn't make it to ordinance number 3 that's listed here, but ordinance 1 is the ordinance that would levy the 1/4 cent sales tax. Ordinance number 2 is the ordinance that would call for the special election.
Got that.
To supporting the 1/4 cent sales
tax. That's the same quarter tax.
Same 1/4 cent tax.
That's what I thought a while ago.
Ordinance number 3 is the ordinance that would call for the special election for a 3/4% sales tax to support, just specifically as it's listed here, issuing bonds under the amendment number 62 to the Constitution of the State of Arkansas for the purpose of financing the cost of capital improvements, extensions, and betterments to the city's streets and drainage system, levying the 3/4 million. But that's specifically for that. And if this were to pass, then we would pursue issuance of bonds. Once the bonds were satisfied, this tax would cease to be collected.
I understand it. That's what I thought, because we've been discussing only 1%. But when you see 3 ordinances, I just don't want Sherwood citizens to think that if we move forward on this, that we're looking at a 1.25.
No,
and I think that's very important. That's why I just
wholeheartedly understand, and I think in addition to that, I think it's important that the citizens of Sherwood understand that this is something we're taking to them to vote on. I mean,
right.
They get the vote here. You know, it's not this body that says, "Hey, we're gonna levy, you know, X tax." They have the final say in the way that this is presented now.
I think it's important, and I stated this at our meeting, to keep it simple. And if we're going to try to get a 3/4% sales tax for our streets, that's the one we need to have, is this one. If we want a 1/4% for the general fund, I think that's the way we need to go. I do not think we need this insurance. I think we're going to confuse the voters and stand a chance of losing both elections or both ordinances. We really do need the street ordinance. I think everybody knows that. And we need the ordinance for the 1/4% for our general fund. We've been operating, as you well know if you've been on the budget committee, on the land for a long time. So I would preferably not support the insurance 1/4%. I would rather use that 1/4% for the general fund, in which we had talked about if we need to allocate money out of that 1/4% to help out on street projects or anything else, we can do that as a city council function once that 1/4% is passed. Am I stating that right, Kevin, as far as that 1/4%?
One thing though, or is it two separate votes? That's what I just said.
There would be, if it passes this body and gets to the voters, there would be two separate items to vote on the ballot. One would be the 1/4% permanent sales tax that would support the city's general fund. The other would be a 3/4% to support the capital improvements of the streets within the city of Sherwood, and that would cease to be collected once the bonds were satisfied and paid off.
And then for continued street work, we could use the 1/4% that we're collecting for continued work in the streets and so on and so forth.
That would be a decision that would be made by the council at budget time as to how much money would be, dispersed to, whatever department, whatever the city uses general fund money for today, it would be able to use that 1/4% for those items if the voters approve it.
So again, Kevin, with that third sentence or fourth line in here, it says for the repayment of the bonds in the quarter language. That's when for the entire time the bond exists, this 1/4% is totally dedicated to the bonds.
No.
Okay, he said possibly right now, as written, it does.
That would be the deletion of that sentence would be the recommendation of the street committee. Okay, now this body doesn't have to delete that. What we've got to understand then, though, is that 1/4%. The bond satisfaction of the bond has to be completed before that 1/4% can be spent on other things. And
under this language.
Correct.
Under this language.
I believe that's looked at monthly is what Mr. Spivey shared.
For the whole term of the bond.
Right.
But yeah, that monthly term, and the trustee says, no, I've got all the money I need for this month, so then the money's free.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
But if this body, if the council decides that you want to leave the 1/4% sales tax, a language the way it is, and that be a secondary coverage, to repay the bonds if there was an issue, then that's certainly within the rights and authority of this body.
The other thing too is that, Leanne, do we have to put the bond amount on this before it goes to the FNA?
Yes.
So I thought that's what we talked about the other night, the bond amount and the date for the election. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So that has to be decided in general terms tonight before it can go to DFNA for their approval.
Well, can I speak to the election for just a second?
Sure.
My marching orders after the meeting the other night were to determine when in June we could have a special election. And by statute, it has to be June the 19th, which is the same day as the preferential primary runoff The way it was explained to me, if a runoff occurs in a race that would be on a ballot in the city of Sherwood, whether it be a state issue, a county issue, or if there's, I don't think there would be a city question because that election's not till November. Just for the sake of discussion, if there's something that the voters in Sherwood would go and vote about, not the taxes, then the expense of the election would be minimal on the city. On the other hand, if there's not anything that would be Sherwood specific, if you will, we would have to front, or not front, but we'd have to pay for the election. But it has to be on the 19th if it's in June.
So, and Steve, thank you. So, in the street committee meeting this past Thursday, we had decided that June was the month we wanted to target. That doesn't have to be set in stone. I mean, I don't think we can, really come in any before that. I think that's kind of, based on, the steps we've got to take to get there. June would be the first potential month that we could have the election.
So let me ask about May, because that would be the primary, correct? And so working back on your steps, I'm just trying to think of saving any money we can, because those elections can get expensive. So
I think it was the general thought, wasn't it, that you have a greater chance of passing?
Well, we were talking that, but also I think in order to get it on the May ballot,
that's my question.
Then we would have to pass these tonight, which would require that they've already been approved by DFNA. I mean, we're just not there. I mean, we just don't have
the time. We don't have
the framework yet.
Okay.
So I think June was the first month that was available, for us to work the timelines with DFNA approval, this body's approval, and then go through the steps to actually get it on the ballot.
And I think we also discussed the fact that even though it would be a primary in May or a runoff in June, when you put a special election attached to something else, there's a good chance of it not passing. But then again, for a runoff, it's not a big item. What do you think, Lynn?
Well,
You guys deal with
I'm
this.
thinking the library passed on a general election in November, and so that argument doesn't work really.
Not all
and
the
that,
time.
Not all the time, right? I'm just trying to save the city money. I'm just thinking that, but if the math doesn't work, the math doesn't work. So.
I'd like to have one of those anyway.
I would too, believe me.
What is the cost to the city for a general? I mean, for an
About
election?
20,000. Steve, let me ask you something. Because we're going to be doing reimbursements, would the election cost be reimbursable?
I don't think so.
No, I believe that would be considered a soft cost, and we'd probably get our hands slapped really hard for that one. The other question that was out there is how much money? How much money do we need to raise and bond out in order to get really started on the projects that we've got in front of us? And that dollar amount was $35 million is what we had determined, and what we've shared with Leanne and others.
Kevin, does that include the Brockington extension at all? Do we have a ballpark or anything in terms of that?
So I mean, it includes the thought of the Brockington extension, if you will. But there's a lot of street needs out there, a lot of street improvements, and quite honestly, we're going to find some of them just due to the nature of what they are going to be more difficult to do and going to take more time. So the thought and approach is that is $35 million going to cover 100% of the capital improvements that we need in our streets? In Sherwood, absolutely not. I mean, it's just not going to. But the thought is, if we are able to get this passed, we're able to spend our money in a wise nature and show the citizens of Sherwood that we are taking care of their money. And then there are additional needs in the future down the road that we could go back and ask for that to be extended, to another bond issue or whatever. But again, that would go back to the people at that point in time, which is years down the road. You'll also
So is 35 million, Kevin, excuse me for interrupting, is that the amount that you're wanting to put into that dollar figure to go before it goes to the FNA?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, actually, can I speak to that? 35 million is the project fund amount. So to arrive at the ordinance amount, we typically take the project fund amount plus 100% of your maximum annual debt service. So in this, the handout I gave you, that's about 2.7, 2.8 million, and then we estimate cost of issuance. Now I will tell you, this is the ceiling. You don't have to issue all of it. You know, if the directive is 35 million in project funds, that's what we'll do. I would suggest putting 38.5 million, and then that way we're covered. And I say that because when I was an issuer, I had an experience where I did not have enough authorization, and I was not able to get the best deal for my entity because of that. I had to go with a different structure.
So the project is 35, and that's the other cost. Okay.
So to get to 35, you would recommend 38,500,000 as the maximum.
A lot of that is your 100% of your maximum annual debt service, and then cost of issuance.
So if we were to go to ordinance 3, and we just put the 38.5 in that center line, and at the bottom under section 1 we put June 19th, then is that a motion that we'd be ready to move forward with on ordinance 3?
Well, it's going to have to go 38.5 has to go on the second page too.
Okay. And at the top, on the top of also the June 19th.
Your question, will they be suitable for going out to DFNA? Is that your question?
Yeah. Is it suitable for us to make a vote on this one,
Do we
on
need to
ordinance
make a
3
formal
alone?
vote, or do we just need to make it, yes, we want this to go?
Okay.
Okay.
So my question is,
You can raise hands.
so in our discussion,
I'm saying I could take it, I could get it.
consensus, that's what I'm asking.
Right,
A consensus is that's good, that one would be good to go. The other one may have more discussion, but that one's done with. Maybe, Kevin?
Yeah, I think that's,
Trying to put 1 to bed, is what I'm trying to do.
we'll put 3 to bed. How about that?
Okay.
Number 3 to bed.
Okay, number 3 is to bed. Thank you. With those inserts on the missing lines.
And I'll have to say that the affirmative answer to that is going to depend on what I can speak on this 5 years. I think
Sure.
That's
correct,
fine.
but
Okay.
please understand.
But now you've got the general idea of what the council wants.
On this, I do.
On that
Okay.
one.
I don't.
We have to determine
I
the
know.
Okay.
insurance issue.
I didn't hear what you said.
I agree with Tim and
Yeah, but I
on
do
the
too.
insurance on the
Yes.
insurance issue. I mean, she said we don't necessarily need the insurance issue,
Which is ordinance 1.
which is ordinance 1 and 2.
1 and 2.
1 and 2. That
I
we
wish
could do
you could
without
tell
the
us that if we did this, we would get, a 1.5% better interest rate or something like that. But that's just not there.
without some financial benefit to doing it, and potentially tying up the money and making it just sounds like it makes extra work for Angela and the people in her department to
The only thing I
no
really like
benefit.
about this one though is this. I like the concept. I mean, where we are now is because we don't have a tax for designated for. I mean, we're losing the tax for streets and pieces, and this maintenance and construction as we're growing. This one is the one that stays as a permanent tax for us to continue once we do the projects to continue to maintain those projects. So that's what I'm in favor of, at least part of this, or at least the concept that we would have perpetually have some revenue to keep our streets, so we're not always knee jerking after something happens.
But that language doesn't fix that. We would do that annually with the budget. That language has nothing to do with that. What this language has nothing to do with that. All this language does is insurance for the bond.
It hasn't been uncommon in the past.
We're trying to make it
Hang on just a
broad,
second.
Beverly, so we
I
have
understand it.
flexibility.
But did I not hear you say a permanent tax?
Hold on, we can all sing at the same time, but we cannot all talk at the same time.
Money for the maintenance of the streets. She's saying language in there that it's money for maintenance for the streets as well, that it's fitted to maintenance.
Oh, okay.
So,
You don't want to do that. You want to keep it.
Well,
In general, and then
It has both. It has both in that language.
so
Okay, you're confusing. I'm sorry, I don't mean to say confused. But this language about the betterments of the streets and all that in number one is tied to bonds. It's mirror language so that there's no dispute about what those bonds are paying for. But it is not limiting, as written right now, it is not limiting to after the bond obligation for that month, whatever period has been satisfied, it is not a limitation on the spending of that money in the general fund.
I understand that.
Right?
I understand that.
But it would go to the general fund, and it would have to once
So
the
that's why you
bond
said-
obligation's
yeah.
paid, it would go to the general fund, and 100% of it would go to the general fund, and then we would have to allocate it to the general fund to be paid for maintenance.
And it's not uncommon in years past. General fund has subsidized street fund, but street fund cannot subsidize general fund. So I think that's part of the, I would
understand that.
think, part of the reason that we've talked about.
Good.
You don't get a consensus.
So what's the
okay.
council's pleasure on 1 and 2?
I would like to make an amendment to ordinance number 1, deleting to secure the repayment of bonds issued to finance and refinance extension, betterments, and improvements to the city streets and drainage systems. I'd like the ordinance to read an ordinance providing for the levy of a 1/4% sales and use tax within the city to provide support for the general fund and prescribing other matters pertaining to. That's what I'd like to see the ordinance read.
That's the consensus of the council.
Anybody opposed to that?
I'm not
That would
opposed to it.
simplify things. Sure.
Okay, well, it's not.
Is
set
that
in stone.
appropriate language? I mean,
Well,
I
I
know a
thought
lot of
that
this
it's
with the
5
legalese.
But I get the idea, and if that's council's wishes, then that takes care of. I'm sorry, of 1. This takes care of 1. That takes care of 2 as well.
Right. It'll take care of 1 and 2. That's it.
You don't need 2 then.
I think I understand.
Yeah, you just don't need 2.
You gotta do the election.
Do we need more guidance? Okay. We appreciate you coming tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynn.
Under new business,
I've got,
well, Beverly had already asked to.
okay. I just want to pass a couple of things around. Sylvan Hills High School's new, if you guys will look with me, if you will pass these down, Mayor, if you, and make sure Marina, Kevin, and then one over there for Charlie, and you guys look over with me. You guys share one. Sylvan Hills High School, architect, they're going to be spending $65 million on our high school, and they just brought out this last week some plans, and they wanted. Some people on the school board brought this to me today and asked me if I would share it to city council because they attribute you guys on the council as helping pass this bond issue for the Sylvan Hills High School. If you look at the very first page, that is the existing high school, and anybody in the audience is welcome to look at these. I'll leave them here for just a little bit. That's the existing high school. If you go to the second page, the white buildings are where the new construction will be. Okay, the white building. Then they're going to do the construction in 3 phases. Phase 1 on the next page, the blue pieces there, the very top squared building is going to be the library and the cafeteria. Remember, they're serving 1,600 students in a cafeteria built for 400. So that's a 3-story structure there, this blue structure where the bottom would be the cafeteria and the media center above. And the L-shaped part of the building is a 3-story academic wing. Okay. If you go to, then there's more dialogue on that next page. If you look at kind of right in the center, you see those that look like theater rows. This is a symposium room where you could actually put like 100 and something kids. You could bring, if you had a guest speaker coming in, rather than having to go to 3 different teachers' classes, they could all come in and have, like someone do a presentation in multiple classes. Yes, seminar classroom. Then that's just kind of like the L shape on the second floor, how the wings would be. The very top of that trapezoidal shape at the top, is the media center that would be open up and lots of glass. It reminds me of the Sanders Library a little bit, with the glass on that. So turn a couple of pages and go to the next colored page. You see the stairs, the big blue piece there is that multi-purpose room, the theater style room. You see the stairs and you see the big steps, the big stepping areas. That is if where students could congregate, sit and meet. It's a seating area, not necessarily steps. But this is kind of what they've got the architect designed. The next page is your cafeteria, and you see the Sylvan Hills blue. The very top of that second floor is your media center, which would look out onto the cafeteria. But this is it from one, and again, it's going to seat like 1,000 students instead of 400. Then this is the cafeteria. The next page from the other view, where you're actually looking out into the campus, and you have the openness of it. The next color picture is the one with just hallways, and you're seeing into the media center from the hallways. The next picture is from the atrium that looks out onto the opening. This is like the main entrance. The glass area there is your media and cafeteria on the right side. Same thing on the next. On the next page of the new building on the left side, that's your auditorium that would be built. And they would welcome community use of that auditorium for civic events or things around the community. The next page is the part on the left is the entrance where parents would come in and drop students off, parking, and to the right would be the indoor, the arena, I believe it. Okay. Huh? Well, that's a different building. They have an arena and then the indoor training facility. This building on the next page, where there's a red car on the far right, is the back of the building, I do believe. The next picture that has is the front of the entrance where parents will drop off. Then again, this is the back of the building. We're seeing the cafeteria part there, the blue and white and black glass. And you see the circle drive again where parents are dropping off. If you go to the part that has now phases 1 and 2, y'all need to go about 3 pages. The second part would be the auditorium there, the new blue that's going at the bottom left. These pages aren't numbered, I'm sorry, babe. Right there, right. That's the auditorium. And you said that those bids are going out now. They're at the end of next month. In May, next spring. The next page is a picture of the auditorium. As all of us know, when you build something, you can't afford everything you wanted. They wanted to seat 1,300 students. The auditorium is only going to seat 1,000, but right now the auditorium only seats 400. So this is almost 3 times the existing auditorium. But that would be what the auditorium would look like. This is how it would be the performing arts from the outside. And the next pages are going to be more pen and pencil rather than colored because they're going out for bids and it's rough draft. I can see lots of concerts. I could see our theater department growing and having an actual performing arts in Sherwood. There's some interior views for it. The next brings in phase 3, and that's your arena. It's going to seat over 2,000. The entire sports arena at the high school. And just move on a few more pages. Again, paper, pencil. And then the last page, the next colored page, you'll see the bear on the front. It actually says arena, Sylvan Hills Arena. More pictures of the arena. And then the very last phase 4 is the indoor practice field. And if you look at those 2 new blue boxes, the big one is a practice field and the tiny little one to the left. If you've ever seen, y'all have all seen Sylvan Hills High School band at every one of our parades, the Christmas parade. That band is one of the largest ones around. they have well outgrown their band facility, and so the little blue one to the left is doubling the band facility, and then you have your practice field, indoor practice field for all sports. And I think that's the end of it. But they asked Mayor if they wanted, first off, to again thank the council and the citizens for voting on this. And I have to take some of these back, but they did give one to the city. So Mayor, if you'll keep one, then I'll return the other 3. After any of the patrons that want to look through it, you're welcome to look through it, and I'll answer questions. Thank you. You're welcome.
That capacity of that school again.
The capacity today,
No,
how many people are there?
The new school.
I would be telling I'd just be pulling a number out of nowhere. Huh?
Roughly 3,000.
Mhm. Okay. And there's 1,600 there now, and if you saw that they did the open enrollment, there'll be students from other communities that are fighting at the bits to come to our schools.
Thank you. Is there any more new business?
I had a question brought up to me by a couple of people in my ward about the possibility of basically filming and putting out on the internet the planning commission meetings like we do the city council meetings. They felt like it'd be very helpful in terms of getting information out, just kind of because a lot of people can't attend the meetings. And I just wanted to kind of bring that forth.
I think it's a great idea. I was looking at the YouTube, and this meeting in a couple of days will be on YouTube, and it will give you a notice that there was a update, and then you just go there and view it. And it's really simple, pretty simple. You just got to subscribe to City of Sherwood.
I would just need to confirm with computer services that someone need to be here to do that. If you mentioned it to me before, I would have made sure we had all that information. Is there something, Casey, that needs to be done?
Yeah, it's gonna be started and stopped.
Okay.
That's time.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Just be a matter of the secretary for planning commission taking care of it. Okay. Okay. All right.
Mayor, one quick thing. I think everybody was presented with this. This came up at our street committee. Tab had, from Metroplan, had done an excellent job in bringing to us the development of our streets and analysis and so on. There's maps in there and everything. So look those things over. They're really informative.
Thank you. Is there any more new business? We have announcements. Sherwood Citizens Police Academy Alumni Association on the board will donate 20% of lunch or dinner ticket for SCPAA on December 20th, 2017, and Papa Murphy's 15% of every sale on the following date of December 28th of this year. Sherwood Trail Lights continue through December 30th. Sherwood Animal Shelter Home for the Holidays pre-adoption event December 18th. The 21st at the Animal Shelter New Year's Pet Adoption event is January 2nd and 6th, 2018. Is there any more announcements?
Merry Christmas. Question, because I had a phone call asking, have we gotten any information yet back from the highway department as to estimated time frame for changing out of signage? We heard anything on that?
Well, now that you brought that up, we've had some concerns of some business owners upset, so they weren't noticed. They weren't notified. And we also we've got an issue that has got to be worked on staff-wise about some duplication of addresses because that was not taken in consideration. So who's going to change their addresses as far as 200, 300? So those things got to be reviewed, and there's going to be some unhappy folks. Somebody's going to have to change.
There was one lady, if that's the one you're referring to, and I spoke to her personally, and she was not upset at all. And she said she did receive.
We just received notification that someone expressing why they were not notified.
Right, that was that lady, and she actually did receive several notifications.
Okay. All I know is she said she did.
Go ahead and talk to her. But anyway, It actually was addressed in that it doesn't have to be a 3-digit address. It can be a double and a single. And I actually spoke to her on the phone, and she loved that idea. And I referred to her to, I think it was Law, to the planning department for the city picks those.
And we will get with Paul and I had this discussion the other day, but it does need to come from internal, and let's get it resolved. You know, it's already a little bit confusion has started on it, but that's something that's going to be worked out internally. As far as the signage question, I don't think it's going to be a lot of signage. That's not a major.
Calendar, but remember, we didn't have an emergency clause on that. It's only just about.
Right, and that's why I was asking if there was,
Regional director.
should be end of December.
Because they cooperate with us. You didn't know when. It'll have to be within a cycle, and they have to shut down 2 lanes of 3 lanes on the freeway to actually hang the sign.
Any more questions, comments?
Move we adjourn.